Hi everybody, this is Craig Teener for The Mindful Eye and the Daily Critique. I have a really interesting submission today. Mark from Minnesota has submitted 5 images that he's taken on the same scene. And under the backstory and questions and comments, Mark says, I like to take pictures of American flags when I travel to illustrate the many places that I find them. He says, however, it's often difficult to shoot the flag in a new and interesting way. So I'm submitting 5 different images I just took of one flag and would ask for your thoughts on how to creatively approach the same subject over and over again. And he says, I guess I'm looking for your thoughts on creativity, composition, etc. So we've been looking at this first version for a little while now, and what I want to do is I want to go ahead and show you the rest of the images that Mark submitted on this scene. There's number 2. And then I want to get them all up on the screen at one time. There's number 3. Here's the number 4 version. Obviously, so far we've been coming in tighter and tighter. And now we go back to a pulled out version where it's sort of the widest shot yet, but we've got the combination of the flag in color and the rest of the scene in black and white. Now what I want to do is get them all up on the screen at one time. So I'm going to add 2, and I'm going to add 3, and I'm going to add 4 and 5. First thing that I want to do is talk about Mark's question. Then I'm going to come back and talk about the images, because I think there's something that's really interesting in the question here. Mark says he finds it difficult to shoot the flag in a new and interesting way. And one of the things I would say right away is I would love to talk to Mark about the project. I hope that he sees this and he comes in and we get a good discussion going about Mark's submission and his backstory here. I think a lot of taking this forward has to do with the project itself. And I think that if the idea is documenting the flags as you travel and putting them in a context, then we don't have to be concerned so much with photographing the flag in a new and interesting way. And what I'm trying to say here is that if this project is about a series of images that just document the flag in places that are thought-provoking, or there's a visual story that's being told because of the selection of this particular flag and this particular place being very interesting all by itself. So in other words, it's interesting so you can just walk up and shoot with a sort of normal lens and take more of a documentary shot, then I think that something amazing just in and of itself could happen, particularly if we're talking about this project becomes a show, so that each one of these images is documentary. And what do I mean by that? It's very much like this. It documents the flag in a space that's fascinating for the viewer. And we do that over and over again. To me, the difficulty in this work would not be so much a design standpoint or seeing light or those kind of things. They could still be very important. But the difficulty would be in essentially finding the flag in places that just by the selection process, the places are interesting enough to carry this off. So it's a very, very different thing than trying to say, how can I creatively photograph a flag, or how can I make each flag beautiful? And I really do want to make a point here, which is that can become very, very difficult and become very, very tiresome. That can be true in our photography overall. If we're constantly having to sort of, one-up ourselves, and we're constantly pushing to just make it about beauty, or just make it about the idea of the design being the thing that really speaks to the viewer, then we're basically training our viewer to say, each and every time I show you a photograph, then it has to stand all by itself and to be really fascinating. And I think one of the really cool things about project work, when we say to the viewer, look, I'm not really going to hit you over the head every time. What I am going to do is take you on a journey. And the spaces that I'm going to show you are interesting. And at the end, thinking about the whole thing. Every time you're going to be seeing a flag in a setting. And so you don't have to start over. I'm not saying to you that every one of these shots is going to wow you at the level of design in the way that I photograph a flag. But what I am going to say to you is something that's potentially even more powerful than that, which is a story that the viewer can make up, questions that they have, because the selection of the flag and the environment is really interesting. And to me, When I look at these images, this is the one that's the most fascinating to me because of the thing that I've just been talking about. There's a real quirkiness with the chairs. They seem very modern and very sleek. This seems very rustic. From a composition standpoint, this works really well with the chairs and the flag and the shot, because to me, in addition to the psychological difference between the chairs and the rest of the shot, the chairs are also visually outrageously heavy. They break the line of this structure that's very important to the image. They're backed by this shadow, super high contrast. And in this particular composition, from a visual design standpoint, they exist in this space in a way that's pretty balanced because of this shape up here that's white helps to balance. That's moving on a diagonal through the flag. I just really like the way this shape up here and the way it plays out, the positive and negative space shapes, the way those ideas, if you look at this, it's the chair that's become very big. And just the feeling of the balance on this side of the structure to this side of the structure, the way you see more of the roof here and very little of the roof here, all these things to me from a visual design standpoint are working here too in a real basic kind of way. Once Mark comes in and he starts to sort of work this scene, and now it's just about the flag, if I just want to talk about something being more beautiful than not from a design standpoint, I would personally chuck these two and I would hold on to these two. Again, these two are very, very similar. I have a personal dislike, it's very personal, of color mixed with black and white. I'd just take the flag and turn it into black and white. And then these two are really interesting to me documentary shots that are also beautiful in a not get hit over the head with the beauty kind of way. It's easy for me to say. But these two shots where we're starting to make this more about sort of selection and trying to do something with the subject fall apart for me. I get overwhelmed with the chairs here. There's also not enough information psychologically to sort of make this pay off to me. This is just a shot of these chairs. And this square has all this symmetry, and then it falls down here, and I start thinking about that, and it's not really attention for me. It's just something that's sort of not working. This, on the other hand, is coming in and doing something with a flag where you've got this really cool sense of design. You've got the rectangle within the shape that's like this more square. Same thing with the flag now in a bigger sense. You've got the rhythm of the lines and the rectangles, and then you have the difference in the texture between the wood and the feeling of the flag. And to me, that's really fascinating. So that's sort of my take, on several different things that Mark talked about. I like this one, and so I'm trying to make this one beautiful. I'd darken it, really bring out the difference between the flag and the background, and then I'd darken the right and bottom, the top right and bottom right corner to hold the eye in. This is where Mark started. If I was going to work on this one, this is where I might end up, and I would make this one just black and white. Sorry I did such a bad job on the conversion. It looks like I poured something wet all over the flag in the barn, but that's because I did that really fast. But I would just say black and white, and then I love this. To me, this is another one where those chairs are really working in the space. That's my take. I want to kind of stop there because I'm hoping that there'll be a discussion. People will come in and they'll give Mark more feedback about what they think, and would also love to hear your ideas about how you might approach a photographic subject. I'm going to save my answer to that for Mark and for the community a little bit later in the week. I'll do a self-critique, and I'll pick an image and talk a little bit about approaching a subject, but I really don't think that we can take this out of the context of this idea that Mark has a project here. And I'd love to hear Mark come in and weigh in about, outside of just documenting the flags, what does he see ultimately doing with this? And I think that question, in the same way that you ask a question, about a picture, what am I trying to say here? I think a really interesting question for this critique and this discussion is, what is Mark overall trying to say with this project? And I think that starts to answer the question about approach. We can talk about near to far, high to low, walking all the way around, abstract versus literal, more of a story and more layered versus something that's more straightforward and so forth. And I do want to talk about that later in the week. But for now, let's leave it at that. Almost more of a question. Would love to hear your feedback. I love this submission. I love that image. Love it. One of my favorite photographers of all time is Joel Sternfeld. It's a good photographer to Google and to look at his work. And this reminds me very much of a Joel Sternfeld photograph. There's something very ironic about those chairs and then the structure and the flag. And I just love the story that's being told here. This is an image that really fascinates me and really makes me think. It's very provocative, both emotionally and just from the standpoint of story. Big thank you to Mark. Big thank you to all of you for being here on the Daily Critique.